I thank the member for Holsworthy, and shall now call the member for Strathfield, who is joining us remotely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm really pleased to be able to speak on the Anti-Discrimination Religious Vilification Bill 2021. And I want to start by acknowledging the member for Liverpool in his capacity as the Shadow Attorney General for the work he has done on this bill. One of the last acts I had as the Leader of the Opposition was to ensure this sort of reform within our party, and I also acknowledge Jihad Dib, the member from Kemba, and Tanya Mahaley, the member for Bankstown. To understand why this bill is needed, it's important to note the history of anti-discrimination in New South Wales. In 1997, the Anti-Discrimination Act was passed in New South Wales, making it unlawful to discriminate on the grounds of sex, race and marital status in the areas of employment, accommodation, goods and services and education. In the decades since, amendments have been made that ensure there are other protected attributes such as age, disability, sexuality. These amendments reflect continuing consensus in this House on the importance of equality of opportunity and the right of all to feel safe and respected in public life. Mr. Speaker, in 1994, an amendment was made to Section 4 of the Anti-Discrimination Act to extend the definition of race to include ethno-religious origin and descent. It was explicit that the amendment would extend the Racial Discrimination Act to include those of the Sikh, Jewish and Islamic faiths. However, the diversity of Islam, its various traditions developing independently across different continents for centuries, makes it very difficult to accept the inclusion of all Muslims as one ethno-religious group in our courts. Now, Mr. Speaker, I believe that as lawmakers we have a responsibility to ensure there is fairness and there is consistency in our legislation, and in passing this bill we fulfil that responsibility. This legislation will protect any visibly religious person, for example converts who do not share the same ethnic or racial heritage but may still be targets of vilification. The legislation is also inclusive of atheists and agnostics, protecting them from vilification on their beliefs. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all those stakeholders who have advocated for reform. And while I acknowledge the many different religious groups that have supported reform of some sort, I, as the member for Strathfield, want to focus my contribution on the Muslim community and specifically Muslim women. I do this not out of disrespect for any religion or a person of faith, because those who know me well know that I am a strong advocate of multiculturalism and multi-faith communities. But I choose to make my contribution specifically about Muslim women because I believe they in particular have no protections. In response to this bill, Mr. Speaker, the Australian National Imams Council says, and I quote, "The bill addresses a glaring and fundamental absence in the protective laws relating to vilification in New South Wales. In New South Wales, there is no legislative protection against vilification directed at a person based on their religious identity and belief. This is despite that protections are provided against vilification based on other protected attributes." Mr. Speaker, observing hijab is a key tenet of Islam, much like a Sikh who wears a turban or a Jewish man who chooses to don the kippah. Muslim women who wear the hijab are practicing their faith and deepening their relationship with God. However, unlike Jewish or Sikh men, an attack on a Muslim woman on the basis of her hijab is not treated by the existing law as discrimination. Mr. Speaker, so often in this place we speak of the details of bills and laws, and while this bill is technical in nature, the ramifications of it passing this Parliament are real and they are life-changing. In 2019, Rana Elzamar, who wears the hijab, was sitting in a cafe when she was attacked. Rana was 38 weeks pregnant. She'd never met the man, kicked and punched her to the ground. Now, the assailant had a history of violence against Muslims, and during the trial, he was ejected from the courtroom for his continual racist interjections. Now, I've met Rana, that I've heard her tell her story, and it is powerful. And it is also deeply unsettling that in New South Wales, this crime is not recognised for what it is. That is a crime against a Muslim woman because of her faith. Ramia Abdo-Sultan, an accomplished hijabi lawyer, spoke to me about the frustration of the Muslim community, that the attack on Rana was regarded by the law as no different from a random assault. It was not recognised as a hate crime, and it should have been. Quite simply, Rana was attacked because she was Muslim. That is the only reason she was attacked. The fear experienced by Muslim women is very real. As soon as you step out the door, you're a target because you wear a hijab, says Rana. This sentiment is echoed by Muslim women across New South Wales. Sabreen Faruqi, a prominent community activist and educator, tells how Muslim women, especially migrant women, fear leaving their own neighbourhoods because the experience of being verbally abused is so common. Sahar Dandan is the founder of Go Active with the Lebanese Muslim Association. Now, I've been to visit the Lebanese Muslim Association. It's an incredible program that encourages Muslim girls and young women to participate in sport and to feel really confident and engaged. But she says that on a daily basis, the discrimination experienced by teenage girls who seek to shut themselves away and minimise their religious identity. Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that the lack of protection from vilification is functioning as a form of segregation, preventing many Muslim women from participating in public life outside of their known communities. No one should have to feel they must choose between expressing their faith and feeling safe. Every woman in this state has a right to feel safe and be safe. And it is incumbent on us as members of this parliament to ensure that happens. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Islamophobia Register records and verifies incidences of Islamophobia, including physical violence, hate speech, vindictive property damage, and online abuse. Now, it's important to note that the register is by no means complete. It includes the experiences of only those who know the register exists, and only those who choose to relive the trauma of their experience. It also includes only accounts that are possible to verify. But despite its limited nature, the Islamophobia Register is meaningful. It is evidence that fear and anxiety are justified. It refutes the notion that abuse and assaults against Muslim women are rare or they are random. In order to understand the importance of this bill to Muslim women, you must understand what wearing hijab means to them. Now, Mr. Speaker, many of them have spoken to me about how important it is to them to have the freedom to express their faith without fear. As well as being an act of devotion to God, the hijab has a multitude of meanings to the women who wear it. For some, it's a symbol of agency and self-determination. It's a celebration of culture and the expression of sisterhood and solidarity. Ramia Abdo-Sultan, the lawyer I mentioned earlier, told me, and I want to quote this, she said, "Wearing the hijab liberates me from the expectations placed on me in general, in that I am free. I am free to choose the way I want to represent myself, my strength, and the way in which I choose to be devoted to my faith and beliefs." Now, Mr. Speaker, we all know in this parliament that legislation alone will not eliminate Islamophobia. There is so much work to be done. However, in passing this legislation, we send a strong message that religious vilification in all its forms is not acceptable. In response to this bill, Sahar Dandan of the Lebanese Muslim Association says, if passed, this bill is, and I quote, a clear sign to Australian Muslims that they are considered important members that make up the social fabric of this community. It means that we are one step closer to ensuring social justice and human rights are given to all Australian citizens. It means that my identity is important enough to protect, that we can negotiate the discourse around Islam and Muslims and work towards a reconstruction of our own narrative without fear and what it means to be a Muslim woman living in New South Wales, end quote. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a significant reform. And while I have focused my contribution today on the impact on Muslim women, I want to again acknowledge that this bill is about the rights of all New South Wales citizens to practice their religion free of discrimination and vilification. Again, I want to acknowledge the member for Liverpool and good work he has done, and I thank my party for having the courage to look at this sort of important reform. I commend the bill to the House, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the member for Strathfield.